SCP-173. Concrete rebar. A few flecks of Krylon brand spray paint on the surface, the kind you'd buy off a shelf at any hardware store. That is the entire material composition of the single deadliest object the Foundation has ever cataloged as number 1. Not the most powerful, not the most cosmic. The first. SCP-173 was the very first anomaly ever entered into the Foundation's records, filed under Object Class Euclid, and it has never once needed an upgrade to stay terrifying. Every anomaly the Foundation catalogs gets sorted into one of a handful of object classes, a shorthand for how hard it is to keep something contained. Safe means exactly what it sounds like, an anomaly that mostly behaves itself. Keter, which several entries later on this list will carry, means the opposite. Something the Foundation struggles to contain reliably, no matter how many resources it throws at the problem. SCP-173 sits in between, at Euclid, which really just means its behavior isn't fully understood or fully predictable. As you're about to see, not fully understood can still be lethal. Here's the rule. SCP-173 cannot move while something is looking directly at it. Break the line of sight for even a fraction of a second and it closes the distance instantly. That's the rule everyone learns first. Here's the exception that actually keeps people alive. A single blink is enough to kill you, which means one guard watching alone is a guaranteed casualty eventually. So the Foundation runs a 3-person rotation inside its chamber, 2 sets of eyes locked on the statue at all times, the third person allowed to blink, and then they swap. Constant decoverage, no gaps, forever. It is one of the simplest containment procedures in the entire Foundation and one of the most psychologically exhausting because the moment attention slips, so does the floor beneath your feet. Twice a month, that same 3-person team has to go further than just watching. The chamber needs cleaning, and one of them has to mop, while the other 2 keep their eyes locked on the statue and call out before they blink. What they're mopping up is a reddish-brown substance that gathers on the floor, later confirmed to be a mixture of blood and feces. Nobody knows where it comes from. SCP-173 has no visible mouth, no digestive system, no biology of any kind that should produce it. It just appears over and over, and someone has to clean it up while staring at a statue that will break their neck the second they look away. When it does move, it does not lunge. It doesn't posture. It reaches you, and it ends things in one of 2 ways. A snapped neck at the base of the skull, or strangulation. No ceremony, no warning shriek. Silence, then a body. SCP-173 is also the reason a lot of people know what the SCP Foundation is at all. In 2012, a Finnish developer built a free indie horror game around it called SCP Containment Breach, and he picked the statue specifically because it was one of his favorites from the archive. During development, he ran into a problem. Without some kind of restriction, players could simply run past it without much danger at all. So he built in the blinking mechanic, forcing the player's own eyes to close automatically every so often, the exact same vulnerability the in-universe guards have to manage. The game found an audience far beyond the original wiki, and for a huge number of people, a concrete statue that can't move while you're looking at it became their very first introduction to the entire Foundation. And unlike almost everything else on this list, nobody has ever explained where SCP-173 came from. No excavation site, no laboratory accident, no origin story buried somewhere in a classified file. It is simply the object the entire Foundation archive was built to describe. The very first entry in a catalog that would eventually grow to include gods, monsters, and machines that think. Everything after it had to live up to a statue made of concrete and old paint. What makes SCP-173 the entry point to this list isn't raw power, it's certainty. There is no negotiating with it, no studying its behavior for a weakness, no version of events where understanding it better makes you safer. You watch, or you die. That is the whole relationship, and it was the first thing the Foundation ever decided the world needed protecting from. SCP-096. 96% of the time, SCP-096 is the most harmless thing in the building. It paces, It faces a wall. It reacts to nothing. Staff have described it as childlike, docile, almost sad. That is the rule. Here's the exception that turns this into one of the most feared entries in the entire Foundation archive. If you see its face, even for a fraction of a second, even in a photograph, SCP-096 will find out, and it will come for you. Physically, there's nothing about SCP-096 that should frighten anyone standing still. It stands roughly 2.38 meters tall, about 7'10", with almost no muscle mass and a build that looks malnourished. Its arms hang disproportionately long, close to 1.5 meters each, more than half its own height. Its skin and eyes carry no pigmentation at all, pale all the way through, and its jaw can unhinge to 4 times the width of an ordinary human's. Researchers still don't know for certain whether it can even see. None of that matters once it's triggered. The Foundation learned that the worst possible way during first contact. A retrieval team, callsign Zulu 9A, found the creature in what looked like its natural habitat near a remote mountain range and moved in to capture it. Their helicopter set down close by. It turned toward the noise. Every member of the team saw its face except the captain, who happened to have his back turned mid-conversation with the unit's doctor. The rest of the team died within minutes. The captain lived long enough to warn the backup unit, Zulu 9B, never to look at its face. They bagged its head blind, loaded it onto the chopper, and shipped it to containment without a single member of that second team ever seeing what they were carrying. That's why containment for SCP-096 looks the way it does. It's held in a 5x5x5 meter steel cube, walls at least 25 centimeters of reinforced ballistic plating, access restricted to only the most senior personnel on site. Anyone who has to go inside wears eyewear specifically designed to keep them from accidentally glimpsing its face. And it isn't only the staff who get protected. Any outside witness caught up in one of its incidents, including the survivors of that very first retrieval, gets debriefed and administered standard memory suppressing treatment afterward because the danger doesn't end when SCP-096 is back in its cube. It ends when nobody left alive remembers seeing its face at all. That's the rule now. Permanently, the moment it happens, SCP-096 covers its face with its hands and starts to scream. Not in anger, but in visible, genuine distress, crying and babbling before it finally moves. And when it moves, distance stops mattering. It has been recorded reaching targets hundreds of miles away in a matter of minutes. It does not need to breathe to do it. During one containment breach, staff tracked SCP-096, pursuing a subject designated D9031 straight down into the Tonga Trench, chasing him to a depth of 3,292 meters, nearly 10,800 feet underwater, without slowing down. No oxygen, no hesitation, just pursuit. And here's the part that should unsettle you more than the chase itself. Nothing stops it once it starts. Not walls, not distance, not the ocean floor. It arrives and then, and only then, does it kill. Calm animal 1 second, unstoppable engine of retribution the next. 2 states, nothing in between. Not evil, not vengeful in any way you could reason with, just triggered. SCP-173 only needed your eyes to leave it for a second. SCP-096 needs something almost the opposite, your eyes finding it at all. 2 entries into this list, and the Foundation is already managing 2 entities whose entire threat profile comes down to what a single glance can trigger. Before we get to the next one, hit the like and subscribe button to see more videos like this. Leave a comment on your favorite SCP. Let's get back into the video. SCP-076. Inside a 3-meter cube of black speckled metamorphic stone lies a man in his late 20s, black hair, gray eyes, olive skin, covered head to toe in tattoos of arcane and occult markings, many of them shaped like demon faces. His name, on file, is Abel. Most of the time he's dead, not sedated, not sleeping, dead inside his cube, doing nothing, for months or years at a stretch. That is the rule. The exception is what happens when Abel reactivates. He breaches the stone, rises, and enters a trance, and in that state he ignores every other living thing around him except the nearest human being. He does not stop to think. He does not negotiate. He hunts, engages, and kills every person in his path with a level of strength and speed no unaugmented human should have, shrugging off wounds that would drop a soldier in seconds, his body absorbing damage like it barely registers pain at all. Here's where it gets interesting. Killing him barely counts as a solution. When Abel is finally brought down, his body doesn't stay a body. It putrefies, breaks apart into dust, and reforms back inside the stone cube, ready to reactivate on its own schedule, not the Foundation's. Foundation lore ties him to an older brother, cataloged separately as Cain, and together the two are known as the Scripture Brothers. Compare them, and the contrast is almost unfair. Cain lives openly on site, polite, cooperative, and by every account genuinely helpful to staff, with a memory sharp enough to recite an 800-page dictionary back word for word after flipping through it once. Any injury done to him simply reflects back onto whoever caused it, so he's never needed a cage at all. Abel, his brother, gets a locked stone cube and a kill count. Same bloodline, same impossible durability, two entirely different relationships with the rest of the world. SCP-076 carries a Keter classification, the same tier reserved for the objects the Foundation considers nearly impossible to contain with any confidence, and among the Archive's own community, it's consistently ranked as one of the highest-rated Keter files ever published. That reputation isn't about how it looks. A tattooed man in a stone box doesn't sound like the stuff of nightmares until you remember he's effectively unkillable, permanently hostile, and waiting for a reason to try again. He also doesn't fight like a man who woke up angry. Abel is a trained swordsman, versed in Krav Maga and in several other combat styles that don't have names on record here, and for a stretch of time he served as head trainer for Mobile Task Force Omega-7, nicknamed Pandora's Box, teaching Foundation operatives the same techniques he uses against them. When he needs a weapon, he doesn't reach for one. Slow motion footage of him in combat shows blades being pulled directly out of a small tear in space itself, a personal rift that has produced a two-handed claymore lined with serrated saw teeth, a 6-foot spiked mace, bladed throwing rings, and, on at least one occasion, a flamethrower. And when he's finally killed, the wait for his return isn't fixed. Sometimes the reformation inside the stone takes 6 hours. Sometimes it takes 25 years. Nobody on staff has ever been able to predict which. That's the trade every containment team makes with SCP-076. You are never actually defeating him. You are only ever buying time until the stone goes quiet again. And no one on staff can tell you how much time that will be. Where SCP-173 and SCP-096 are, at their core, single-target killers, Abel is the first entry on this list built for open war, a soldier who trained other soldiers. Armed with weapons he pulls out of the air itself. SCP-106, he looks like an old man left to rot. Gray, decayed skin, the posture of someone long dead who simply never stopped moving. That's the first impression, and it's the least dangerous thing about him. Even the Foundation isn't certain where he came from. The Archive keeps more than one competing account of his origin on file, and one of the oldest describes a military unit investigating a trench gone suddenly silent, finding every enemy soldier inside already dead, torn apart, and coated in a foul-smelling black sludge. A soldier searching the wreckage found a small hole filled with that same substance, slipped, and fell in headfirst. He climbed back out moments later, drenched in it, and was never quite the same again. Whether or not that's exactly how it began, the sludge in that story is the same corrosive residue researchers still find at every SCP-106 incident today. The rule: anything SCP-106 touches begins to corrode within seconds. Metal rusts, wood rots, stone cracks and crumbles, all of it coated in a black, mucus-like residue that spreads outward from the point of contact like the surface itself is dying. Watching a solid wall decay in real time because something brushed against it is unsettling on its own. It is not the reason he's this high on the list. Here's the exception that makes him nearly impossible to contain. SCP-106 can vanish into solid matter, sliding into what researchers believe is a personal pocket dimension and reappear from any point connected to where he entered. Walk into one wall, step out of another across the building. There is no door to lock, no room secure enough, because the walls themselves are the way in. Every containment chamber the Foundation has ever built for him has that one flaw baked into its own architecture, and it's part of why SCP-106, like the others in the back half of this list, sits at Keter classification. Not because the Foundation misunderstands him, but because understanding him hasn't made him any easier to hold. He is not fast, he is not especially agile. He will stand motionless for days, hang upside down from a ceiling for just as long, and simply wait. Prey between the ages of 10 and 25 draw his particular attention, and once he has one, he drags them down into that pocket dimension with him, disabling major organs and tendons first, so there's no chance of escape once they're through. Most testing on SCP-106 is carried out using D-Class personnel. Expendable staff the Foundation draws from death row inmates specifically to run the experiments too dangerous to ask anyone else to volunteer for. Even personnel used to being disposable treat an assignment to SCP-106 differently, because with almost everything else on file, at least you know which direction the danger is coming from. Patience as a weapon. A predator with nowhere for you to hide because he brought the hiding place with him, and it exists on the other side of every surface you've ever trusted. Compare him to Abel for a second. SCP-076 wants a fight and comes at you head-on, weapon first, screaming. SCP-106 wants nothing of the sort. There's no confrontation, no chase in the way SCP-096 chases. Just an old man who waits behind a wall you already touched an hour ago, patient enough to let the building itself do the hunting for him. 3 entries into this list, and the Foundation has already had to build 3 completely different kinds of prison. A rule about eyesight, a locked cube of stone, and, for this one, a policy of never fully trusting a solid wall again. SCP-682. Somewhere beneath a containment facility, submerged in a bath of hydrochloric acid, sits a creature no one can classify and, this is the important part, no one has ever managed to destroy. 4 legs, a long tail, a head lined with razor teeth, an overall shape close enough to a crocodile that staff have nicknamed it the Lizard. And, on the more theatrical end of its file, the Last Dragon. Origin unknown. Intelligence confirmed demonstrated during a rare, closely monitored period of exposure when it held a direct, complex conversation with SCP-079, a separate anomalous machine intelligence the Foundation keeps on file. Its enclosure sounds almost modest on paper, a 5x5x5 meter chamber, walls lined in 25 centimeters of acid-resistant reinforced steel, flooded with enough hydrochloric acid to keep it fully submerged and, in theory, incapacitated. In practice, that acid bath does less to weaken it than you'd expect. Here's the rule everyone assumes going in. Enough force eventually destroys anything. Here's the exception that breaks that assumption completely. SCP-682 has been recorded moving and speaking with 87% of its body destroyed or rotted away. Gunfire, explosives, extreme heat, extreme cold, all of it causes damage. None of it has ever caused death. Filtering structures inside its nostrils let it draw usable material out of virtually any liquid solution, which is how it keeps regenerating even while suspended in the very acid meant to weaken it. The thing designed to hurt it feeds it instead quietly the whole time anyone's watching. And here's the detail that should worry you most. It isn't mindless. In recorded interviews, SCP-682 has expressed clearly and repeatedly a hatred of all life, itself included. Every attempted escape isn't an animal bolting for freedom. It's a decision, made by something that understands exactly what it's doing and dislikes everything alive enough to keep making it. Among longtime readers of the archive, SCP-682 is widely treated as the single most well-known Keter-class entity on file, the reference point everyone reaches for when they want to describe something the Foundation genuinely cannot beat, only slow down. There's a crueler wrinkle to the regeneration, too. Whatever method is used against SCP-682, it only works once. After surviving an attack, its new tissue comes back adapted, immune to that exact method the next time. During one termination attempt using another anomalous chemical agent on file as SCP-409, researchers watched it regenerate and emerge completely resistant to the very substance that had just been used to hurt it. Every fight teaches it something. Every escape leaves it larger and stronger than it went in. Standing Containment Protocol now states that no team smaller than 7 members is ever cleared to engage it directly, a number written into policy specifically because smaller teams kept failing. There's one recorded exception to all of that hatred, and it makes the rest of the file harder to read, not easier. During a documented experiment, researchers placed SCP-682 in the presence of SCP-999, an unrelated anomaly best known for radiating harmless, overwhelming joy. For as long as the two were kept together, SCP-682 turned genuinely jovial, playful even. The moment SCP-99 was taken away again, the mood didn't just fade. SCP-682 turned hostile almost instantly, generated an unidentified sound effect that left several staff members helpless with uncontrollable laughter, and used the opening to break containment and kill its way through the facility. Afterward, it said, on record, that it never wanted to feel that again. Whatever briefly made SCP-682 happy is, by its own account, worse to it than staying angry. The Foundation doesn't have a plan to kill SCP-682. They have a plan to keep hurting it forever, fast enough that it never finishes healing. That is the entire containment strategy for one of the most dangerous organisms on record. Not victory, just an unbroken losing streak they refuse to let it end. SCP-3125. Some threats on this list are physical. This one barely qualifies as a thing at all. SCP-3125, nicknamed the Cosmic Starfish and also filed as the Escapee, is described as a metastasized meme complex, an idea that behaves like a living hostile organism, existing partway between the 5th and 6th dimension and only partially intersecting our reality at all. Like SCP-106 and SCP-682 before it, it carries the Keter classification, but for a reason that has nothing to do with claws or corrosion. Here's the rule that makes it different from everything before it on this list. Knowledge is the weapon. Simply becoming aware of what SCP-3125 truly is kills you, instantly, along with anyone whose mind works similarly enough to yours to make them a target too. You cannot outrun it, you cannot outfight it. You can only avoid understanding it, and understanding is usually the entire goal of the people trying to stop it in the first place. That's the exact problem faced by the Foundation's Anti-Memetics Division, a unit built specifically to fight the things human memory can't hold on to, led for years by Marion Wheeler herself. The Division's own containment infrastructure had been designed by a researcher named Ed Hicks, believed to have died under unexplained circumstances a decade before SCP-3125 ever became a named threat. Once the Division got close enough to grasp the entity's true scale, it didn't just kill them for it. It erased the Division and its staff from history itself, as though they had never existed to fight it in the first place, files and memories and all. To put that in perspective, the Foundation grades world-ending outcomes using what it calls K-class scenarios, a lettered system that ranks exactly how a given catastrophe finishes off civilization. The most familiar of these, XK, simply means the end of the world as everyone currently understands it. Left unchecked, full manifestation of SCP-3125 is projected to trigger something rarer and, in its own way, worse. An MK-class end of human consciousness scenario arriving within 4 to 12 hours. Not property damage, not a body count. The end of thought, everywhere, for everyone, on a clock that starts the moment it fully arrives. It has surfaced before. Foundation records trace an encounter back at least 120,000 years to an early civilization called the Obletus, wiped from memory the same way the Anti-Memetics Division nearly was. It took a woman named Marion Wheeler to finally kill it, and the method she used is its own kind of horrifying. She turned herself into a living counter-meme by deliberately erasing her own memories, one at a time, denying SCP-3125 any information it could use against her. She forgot her husband, she forgot her own colleagues. She kept working anyway off handwritten notes and recordings because she could no longer trust her own mind to hold what she needed to know. That sacrifice is what let her unmake pieces of the entity until nothing hostile was left standing. The story of that fight became well known enough outside the Foundation's own archive that it was eventually expanded into a full novel, first serialized on the SCP Wiki starting in 2015 before being published in its own right. Inside the Foundation's records, though, it's simpler than a novel. SCP-325 is contained now at Site-41, sealed inside a specialized mnemonic isolation chamber. This is in the wound closed. The scar, quite literally, forgotten by everyone except the file that says it happened. Notice what's changed by this point in the list. SCP-173 could be beaten by 3 people taking turns not blinking. SCP-3125 took an entire division, a woman willing to erase her own memory of her own husband, and a fight that stretched back over 100,000 years just to survive it once. The threats on this list stopped being about strength a long time ago. They're about how much of yourself you have to give up just to walk away. SCP-5000, SCP-305 could have ended human consciousness itself in half a day. This last entry never needed a monster to reach that same finish line. Every entity on this list has a face, a body, a method. This last one doesn't. What arrived in Foundation custody wasn't a creature at all. It was a suit. A damaged non-functional piece of equipment called an absolute exclusion harness, which teleported in from another version of reality carrying only a recovered log. What that log described is the most dangerous thing the Foundation has ever been forced to reckon with, because it isn't an anomaly attacking humanity. It's what happens when the people protecting humanity decide humanity itself is the anomaly. The Foundation's motto has always been the same three words: secure, contain, protect. In that other reality, the organization broke all three at once. Every contained anomaly was released, even the ones considered harmless, which were simply destroyed outright instead, deliberately, on purpose. Their new mission, replacing everything they'd stood for over 100 years, became the extermination of the human race, carried out by the very organization built to prevent exactly that kind of catastrophe. Here's the exception that makes this worse than any monster on this list. There was a reason. Something had attached itself to humanity's collective subconscious long before anyone noticed, quietly steering the species toward an outcome so destructive that the Foundation judged full extinction to be the lesser evil. A mercy, by their own account, is the word the log uses. The story never fully answers why the Foundation chose this path over every other option available to an organization with that much power. That question simply is the entire point. Somewhere in that silence is a version of the Foundation that looked at everything it was sworn to protect and chose to end it instead, and never fully explained the choice to anyone left alive to hear it. Look back at everything that came before this. A statue that only needs your blink. A chaser that only needs your glance. A warrior who can be killed and simply won't stay dead. An old man patient enough to let the walls do his hunting. A reptile that turns every weapon used against it into fuel. An idea that kills you for understanding it. Every single one of those entries has a containment file, a set of procedures, a team assigned to manage it. SCP-5000 is the one entry on this list where the people writing the containment procedures were the danger. It didn't stay that way, but not by design. The harness itself arrived first, appearing in a flash of light inside another anomaly's containment chamber, carrying the corpse of a Foundation employee named Pietro Wilson, identical down to the genetic code. In that doomed timeline, the living version of Wilson had been sent, quietly manipulated the entire way, to deliver one uncontainable anomaly directly to another. Completing that one delivery was enough to unravel the timeline and reset it, wiping out the genocide before it could finish and leaving the entity that caused all of it hidden from humanity all over again. The world that came out the other side didn't just move on. Convinced the Foundation could no longer be trusted to police itself, the FBI's own Unusual Incidents Unit pushed through the creation of an entirely new oversight body, an agreement signed by 23 separate anomalous organizations, built specifically to keep an eye on the Foundation going forward. But the log survived the reset. The warning stayed on record, which means somewhere, in some version of events, it still nearly happened, and the only thing standing between that outcome and this one was a single delivery, completed by a man who never fully understood what he was carrying. So out of everything on this list, the statue, the chaser, the warrior, the old man, the reptile, the idea that kills you for understanding it, and the organization that turned on its own reason for existing, which one do you think is actually the hardest to stop? Drop your pick in the comments.